Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. As we begin our meeting today, and on behalf of Ottawa City Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. Les peuples de la nation Anishinaabe Algonquin.
The people of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and present have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, as well as all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land.
Councillor Luloff.
Good morning.
Councillor Dudas.
Ici.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Tierney. Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Leeper.
Ici.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts.
Here.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, just before we get started, I want to ask the clerk to remind members of council of our responsibilities with respect to confidentiality and the provisions for closed meetings under Section 239 of the Municipal Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As members are aware and as required by the Municipal Act, the Code of Conduct for Members and Council includes provisions relating to confidential information. This includes that a member shall not disclose or release by any means to any member of the public any confidential information acquired by virtue of their office in either oral or written form, except when required by law or authorized by council to do so. And where a matter has been discussed in camera and that matter remains confidential, disclose the content of the matter or the substance of the deliberations of a closed meeting. As identified in the legal implications section of the report before committee today, subsection 239(2) of the Municipal Act stipulates that a meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, or commercial or financial information supplied in confidence to the municipality, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organization. Consistent with these provisions, council deliberations and consideration of the confidential elements of the proposed transaction are anticipated to take place in closed session at council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, I'll just offer a few additional comments as we get started here and remind members of council that the city is bound by a non-disclosure agreement by the seller of this property. The material contained in the report and the staff presentation today is as much as we are permitted to discuss while still complying with the NDA. I know that members of the public have questions, as do councillors and the media, about many aspects of this potential acquisition. Staff will do their best to answer those questions today while continuing to respect and abide by the NDA. And councillors will be able to discuss this matter in greater depth during our in-camera session at council next week. I just want to share a few additional thoughts before the staff presentation. First, it's important to note that today's discussion is around the potential ownership of the site. It is not about its use. The use of the site has already been determined by a provincial process. The site is an approved landfill and will be a landfill. We are not relitigating that provincial approval. So again, the question is not around whether the site will be a landfill. It is about who will own that landfill. Ce site a été approuvé par la province.
This site has been approved by the province as a landfill and will be a landfill. We only today have to decide who will be the owner. Will it be this city or a private owner?
Will lock us into a particular waste management decision or solution. That decision will be made in 2027 as directed by council a few months ago. If the city does become the owner of this property, we could still, for example, operate an incinerator or another waste energy solution in Ottawa. Incinerators do continue to require landfilling since they eliminate only 75% of the waste. So purchasing this property does not in any way preclude that option. Alternatively, if we do not proceed with a bid, or if that bid is unsuccessful, we're not locked into incineration necessarily either. We could still leverage private facilities or continue to use our current public-owned facility at Trail Road or seek to build a new landfill somewhere else. To put it simply, Council will make its decision regarding our future waste management options in 2027. The question before us today is whether we see value in acquiring this approved landfill site. Let's be clear, however, that if we don't proceed with a bid or the bid is not successful, the site will be operated as a landfill by someone else, either another municipality or a private company. And we will have very limited control over that site and what waste is disposed of there. Another operator may import waste from other municipalities in Ontario and or Quebec. They may have a different approach to public engagement and environmental stewardship.
If there's another owner of this landfill, it is possible that a person will focus on profit instead of the well-being of the neighborhood.
More control. We can choose how we want to operate it, what waste we want to accept, when we want to accept it, and what other options we want to explore on the site. Within the confines of provincial regulation and approvals, those decisions would be up to the city to make. We could make sure that the facility is operated properly while respecting the environment and the surrounding communities, and we can keep our options open about what our long-term solution will be for waste management. As we know, there is less than 10 years of landfill supply left in Ontario. With this dwindling supply, acquiring the property would give the city more flexibility, no matter what option we eventually choose for waste management. Having said that, it has to be the right deal for taxpayers, and it must respect the concerns of residents. I know this has been a challenging process, especially for Councillor Skalski and many of her residents, given the need to maintain confidentiality under the terms of the non-disclosure agreement.
I know that this process has been a challenging process, especially for Councillor Salsky and her resident, given the need to maintain confidentiality under the terms of the non-disclosure agreement.
Again, I want to be clear, the public's interest in transparency and accountability for decision-making is entirely reasonable and appropriate, and we as Council must do everything we can to respect it. In this case, we are bound by the NDA that the property seller has established. It's their process, not ours. Our participation in the process remains conditional on our compliance with that confidentiality. No confidentiality would have meant no opportunity, and this is why Council has so far been briefed in camera on this file. So there are a couple of competing elements of the public interest at play here. Our duty to ensure a safe and seamless disposal of waste across the city, and our duty to govern with as much transparency as possible. Today is our effort to balance those interests thoughtfully, to give residents a chance to better understand the decision that will be before Council, to share their views, to let their voices be heard, without compromising the process that we must adhere to in order to even consider this opportunity. I'm grateful to the delegates who have registered to speak today and share their views, as well as the many residents from across the city, including in Osgoode Ward, who have shared their views through other vehicles. As a last point on this, as the City Clerk suggested, the Municipal Act provides for Council the opportunity to discuss these matters in closed meetings. This is because it's recognized that in order for us to purchase property and to hold a good bargaining position during the process, we must do so behind closed doors. We can't let other potential bidders know exactly what our bid price would be. We take a similarly confidential approach when we expropriate private lands for large city projects for the same reason. In the case of expropriation, staff negotiate confidentially, so property owners are not aware of how much we paid for the property next door. The acquisition prices are only shared with Council and the public once all the transactions have closed. This process is clearly defined and prescribed under the Expropriations Act in order for the city to maintain its bargaining power. The public interest requires that we have a mechanism to ensure confidentiality. Otherwise, we'd be ineligible for purchases such as these. Our costs would escalate, or the city would be exposed to risk, including legal, financial, and security risks. So today's meeting could have been behind closed doors, but we didn't feel that was appropriate or desirable. We wanted to share as much information as possible and provide an opportunity for public engagement. So we are doing more than what is required so that residents have a chance to hear the discussion today and share their views on this important decision. And again, today, the decision is not around whether this site will be a landfill. It is around whether it is already going to be a landfill, and no matter who buys it, it will operate as a landfill. That was settled by the province a few years ago. What council will consider next week is whether the city should make a bid on that landfill or whether another municipality or a private sector operator will end up owning it. So I look forward to today's discussion, and I'll hand it over now to staff to do their presentation.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. We'll just wait for the presentation. So in addition to the colleagues that are sitting with me in front of you, I also want to acknowledge Shelley McDonald, Director of Solid Waste Services, that is also available online when we get into the question period. So before we get into, on the next slide, before we get into the specifics in terms of the site, I just want to provide a bit of context around how today's discussion fits into the city's overall solid waste management planning process. So last year, Ottawa City Council approved a solid waste master plan. That solid waste master plan went through basically 5 years of development and public engagement. And through that 30-year plan, basically we focused on ways to be able to reduce the amount of waste, reuse waste, and divert waste away from the landfill so that we're able to minimize the amount of waste that's going to the landfill. But we also acknowledged through the 50 actions that were approved through the solid waste master plan that we will still need to deal with residuals because we are running out of capacity at Trail Road, despite all of our efforts to try to extend its capacity. One of those actions was to look at alternative technologies to deal with the residual matters. We brought that report forward to council earlier this year, and we received direction to pursue basically 3 options. One is to look at how would we use private landfills once we run out of capacity at Trail, a waste to energy option, and also building a landfill. So that work is proceeding regardless of the direction on this this discussion that we're having today. That work is still proceeding, and we will be coming back with that report in the first quarter of 2027. So in terms of the site itself, it is a privately owned site, as the mayor indicated. It's owned by Taggart Miller, and it's located, as you look on the figure on the screen, it's located in the East End, immediately east of Boundary Road and south of Highway 417. So for context, it's the property that pretty much abuts to the south of the Amazon Fulfillment Center. This site, as the mayor indicated, is already permitted for a landfill. So regardless of whether the city owns it or not, it will continue to operate as a landfill and a waste management facility. Acquiring the site would provide the city with more care and control in terms of the site, in terms of where the waste is coming from, and also manage some of the truck routes. And to that point, if you look at the screen and you look at the blue line is actually the capture area for the site. So pretty much extends from the border with the province of Quebec, extending west to the Trenton-Belleville area. So potentially a fairly big capture area. And as the mayor indicated, despite the confidential nature, and I will get into that in a few slides, to be able to participate in this ongoing bidding process, we were able to establish with the vendors the ability and the opportunity for staff and council to be able to make this public in terms of its intentions before there is a final decision that made in terms of how we proceed with this acquisition. So on the next slide. So as I mentioned, the site is owned by Taggart Miller. It's commonly referenced as the Capital Region Resource Recovery Center. Just as a matter of context, in terms of landfill capacity in the province, as we indicated during the solid waste master planning process, landfill capacity is an issue across the province. There's actually less than 10 years of capacity left across the province. So when we look at the value of the type of site that's in front of you, there is definitely value in terms of what it provides. It's also the only landfill that has been approved in the province in the last 20 years. And to be able to get to an approval, as I will get into the presentation, it's probably a matter of 15 years to be able to get to the final approval stages. So when the site was approved through the Ministry of the Environment process, it included extensive public engagement, a lot of technical developments through that process. The terms of reference were developed. The draft environmental assessment was also filed. So all of that work was approved in 2012 and 2015, respectively. The final permitting approvals for the site were issued by the ministry in 2017. So the site itself is comprised of 475 acres and the location that I mentioned previously. It has a total capacity of 10 million cubic meter of airspace capacity. When we're looking at permitting landfills, we talk about in terms of airspace. For comparison purposes, if we compare it to Trail is 380 acres in size and has 17 million cubic meters of airspace capacity. Now, when the site was originally approved in 2017, it was approved to service the industrial, commercial, institutional sector, and also would accept construction and demolition waste. In 2024, Taggart Miller made an application to the Ministry of the Environment to expand the acceptance of waste to include municipal waste. That was done through a private process. The city was not involved in that process. I did notify council in way of memo in 2024 that application had been made to the ministry, and that was for the purpose of awareness, given that the site is located within the limits of the City of Ottawa. Now, the site is more than a landfill. The landfill is, give or take, is about half of the footprint of the site. There's also other permitted uses on that site, including dealing with contaminated soil, hydrocarbon soils, dealing with excess material, excess soils. It has a source separated element. That was a key element of the site because on the private sector side, in terms of the industrial, commercial, and institutional, there's not a lot of recycling taking place. So the intent was to do essentially source separation on the site, and only the residuals would be going to the landfill site. It has provisions for anaerobic digestion to deal with organics, and also has a leaf and yard waste component. So there are certainly a number of permitted uses on the site in addition to the landfill. So the element that's remaining to be approved on that site is a site plan and then the operational plan. So whoever takes ownership of the site would be responsible for those remaining elements. On the next slide. So as I mentioned, getting a site approved in Ontario is not a quick and easy undertaking. It takes about 15 years to be able to get through the process from beginning to end. And this is pretty much the timelines that it took for this site. So if the city was to be successful in terms of acquiring, what is the city acquiring? It's acquiring the land, and it's also acquiring all of the permits in your approvals that are attached to that site. So at that point, it would provide the ability for the city to be able to manage that site moving forward and make decisions related to the design, the site planning process, the implementation timelines, and also some of the operational decision. As I mentioned, and as the mayor also mentioned, if the city does not acquire it, it will continue to be a landfill, and it will be operated as a landfill. And at that point, we would anticipate, given the capture area for the site, that the site would definitely see waste coming from outside of the city limits. I also want to make it clear that the consideration of the site is very much in alignment with the council's approved solid waste master plan and its council priorities, and it would not take away from council's efforts in terms of reducing waste and also some of our diversion efforts. What acquiring the site would provide is just more flexibility in terms of how we manage our waste assets moving forward. Prochaine diapo. So this is, I want to take a few minutes on the public disclosure piece. As the mayor indicated, this is a privately led process. And I know it certainly introduces a lot of discomfort in terms of our participation as a municipal entity. But the reality is, for us to be in this process, to be able to have this discussion, we needed to agree to the terms of the non-disclosure agreement to basically have a seat through the bidding process. Had the city not participated in it, it's very highly likely that the site would have been sold, and the public would have only found out once there was a new owner for the property. Now, we did sign and I personally signed a non-disclosure agreement earlier in the year in April to be able to allow the city to continue these discussions. Everything that we've been discussing to date has been non-binding. We also made it clear as we move through the process with BMO, who were acting on behalf of the vendors, that as a condition to the city to move forward to a binding process, the city needed to have the ability to make public disclosure of its intent moving forward. So we were able to negotiate those terms with BMO, which is why we're in front of you here today. And we are sharing as much information as we can and as much as information as is permanently possible while still respecting our non-disclosure agreement. We appreciate the importance of public engagement. It's been a cornerstone of the solid waste master plan. Through the 5-year process, we had extensive engagement, and we would fully expect that if we were to proceed and acquire the site moving forward, the public engagement would continue to be a cornerstone of our process. And finally, on the last slide, so the discussions really today is to be able to hear from the public and be able to answer some of the clarification questions that were in the report. Any decisions on how we are proceeding is going to be discussed in camera at council next week. And again, this is with the purpose of protecting the integrity of the confidential bidding process. Now, once the process is completed, and we're permitted to do so, we would certainly be communicated to council and to the public the remaining details that we have not been able to share publicly. So I just want to wrap up, Mr. Mayor, with a few points just to summarize. This is a private landfill that's for sale within our city boundaries. It's the first and only landfill that's been approved in the province over the last 20 years. It has been approved as a landfill, and regardless of ownership, it will be operated as a landfill and as a waste management facility. Acquiring the site would be in alignment with our strategic plan, and it would support our long-term waste management needs. And the ownership would give us care and control over the site, control how we design, control how we operate the facility, and how we engage with the community. And lastly, just a reminder that we are still working on the waste management technologies direction from council. That work will continue, and we will be reporting back to council on that in the first quarter of 2027. So, Mr. Mayor, this concludes my presentation.
Merci, Alain. So before we turn to public delegations, I know there are a few motions to be introduced, and so I'll ask for those to be introduced now. Vice Chair Kitts, I know you're moving a few motions on behalf of Councillor Skalski.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to do that, but I will let Councillor Skalski read them in.
Thank you. So the first one, whereas the Finance and Corporate Services Committee is considering a report regarding the potential municipal acquisition of the Capital Region Resource Recovery Center site, and whereas rural residents have expressed to the ministry and members of City Council significant interest in and concern about the potential for any landfill operation to contaminate groundwater, pollute the air, and impact the quality of life of residents, including contributing dust and noise. And whereas local residents campaigned the ministry to dump the dump for over 15 years, questioning on the suitability of a landfill on Leda Clay and expressing concerns related to the stability of the ground and potential release of leachate and other toxins. And whereas Carlsbad Springs lies within the Bear Brook watershed, a headwater stream that flows to the South Nation River dominated by Leda Clay and other fine textured soils, which includes provincially significant wetlands and wildlife habitat. And whereas the South Nation Conservation Authority is currently studying the Bear Brook watershed to examine how future land use and climate change could impact the watershed. And whereas the last environmental assessment made public for the site by the Ministry of the Environment was dated 2015. And whereas a community liaison committee was established through the ministry's environmental assessment process to represent best practices and support transparency, identify early issues, and collaborate on problem solving. Therefore, be it resolved that Finance and Corporate Services Committee recommend Council direct staff to engage with the already established Community Liaison Committee for the site to confirm or update their terms of reference to include, at a minimum, representatives from nearby communities, Carlsbad Springs, Russell Township, and VARS, South Nation Conservation, local farmers, local ward councillors, city staff, and the facility operator. A requirement that the Community Liaison Committee be convened on a regular basis, at least twice per year, to allow regular and timely updates on issues such as proposed changes to the site's permits or its regulated activities as one avenue to inform and engage the community. And be it further resolved that following the annual report as done for the EA, or the environmental assessment, which includes groundwater, surface water, leachate, landfill gas, dust, noise, biological, and geotechnical monitoring, that staff be directed to review the annual report and post it publicly, along with a summary in plain language for resident review and awareness, and offer a technical briefing to the Community Liaison Committee to present the results and ensure awareness of any areas of concern that may warrant further study and/or action. And be it further resolved that staff be directed to work with the South Nation Conservation Authority to ensure that this landfill is incorporated as appropriate into the hazard mapping and scenario planning for the Bear Brook watershed study. Just keep going?
Yeah, carry on with your other.
Okay, the second motion is in regards to human health risk assessment. So whereas a human health risk assessment is a structured scientific process used to evaluate whether people may be exposed to harmful substances, and if so, whether those exposures could pose health risks. And whereas the ministry's environmental assessment includes an overall assessment of potential impacts alongside air quality, groundwater, and ecological studies. And whereas upholding the best interest of residents would include ensuring the safety of groundwater, soil, air, and other aspects of the environment that contribute to human health. And whereas the site has a history of industrial activities as an auto wrecker for over 30 years, and whereas residents have serious concerns about potential human environmental health impacts that could occur in the event of contaminant release from an active landfill. Therefore, be it resolved that Finance and Corporate Services Committee recommend Council direct staff, should the City of Ottawa be successful in acquiring the site and in advance of its operation, to undertake and publish a human health risk assessment to disclose the already established via the Ministry environmental assessment, baseline of contaminant and exposure data, and an assessment of the risk to human health. And be it further resolved that the human health risk assessment be revised if environmental monitoring reveals a new concern, for example, the exceedance of acceptable thresholds, air emission change, new contaminant of concern, or a new contaminant of concern is identified, in accordance with normal practices, and that this information be publicly available and shared with the Community Liaison Committee. And the third one is in regards to rural truck route review, signage, and infrastructure. So whereas council is considering a report regarding the potential municipal acquisition of the Capital Region Resource Recovery Center site located near Carlsbad Springs, and whereas increased activity at the site will result in additional traffic using the surrounding rural road network, including heavy trucks and employee and visitor trips, with implications for safety, traffic operations, and quality of life in and around Carlsbad Springs. And whereas residents in Carlsbad Springs and nearby rural villages have raised concerns to the ministry and members of council regarding heavy truck traffic, including noise, safety, and cut-through movements on residential streets and through village cores. And whereas the city's rural truck route network and associated signage may be reviewed and improved to better direct trucks to appropriate corridors and minimize impact on local communities. And whereas the Transportation Master Plan is the city's primary tool for identifying and prioritizing major transportation infrastructure investments over the long term, and whereas proactively identifying and prioritizing network improvements that support safe and efficient access to the CRRC site and protect nearby rural communities from undue impacts would better position the city to respond to future growth in the area. Therefore, be it resolved that Finance and Corporate Services Committee recommend council direct staff prior to site activation and regularly thereafter to assess and make recommendations to reduce the cumulative impact of trucks in the Carlsbad Springs area, both in terms of impact on the road infrastructure and quality of life for residents. And be it further resolved that Finance and Corporate Services Committee recommend council direct staff to review the rural truck route network serving the CRCC site and surrounding area in consultations with the Community Liaison Committee and interested residents, including existing and potential truck routes, signage, traffic, mitigation measures, and to identify and implement solutions that maximize clear wayfinding for truck operators and minimize disruption and cut through traffic on residential streets and in rural village cores.
Thank you, Councillor Skalski. Councillor Brown, I know you have a motion on behalf of Councillor Skalski and also direction.
Thank you, Mayor. If Councillor Skalski would like to read the motion and that I'm moving on her behalf.
Thank you. I appreciate both of you and Councillor Kitts for bringing these forward on my behalf today. And so this last one is a positive community benefit agreement. Whereas council is considering a report regarding the potential municipal acquisition of the Capital Region Resource Recovery Center site located near Carlsbad Springs, and whereas recognizing the impacts that landfill operations have on residents, private sector proponents develop community benefit programs to provide positive investments directly to the impacted community in the form of grants to improve parks and pathways, scholarships, etc. And whereas rural communities often shoulder a disproportionate share of environmental and infrastructural burdens like landfills that compromise their quality of life and the rural lifestyle that they enjoy. Therefore, be it resolved that Finance and Corporate Services Committee recommend council direct staff, should the city acquire the CRRC site, to review options available to establish a community benefit mechanism for the city to provide direct positive benefit to Carlsbad Springs and surrounding communities in the form of grants for local improvements and report back to ARAC in 2027. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skalski. Councillor Brown, did you want to read the direction?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Though a potential purchase of the CRRC does not preference or preclude any future waste management decision of council, it does represent new information to consider as staff develop a recommendation and finalized business case for Ottawa's future waste management system. As part of the in-depth evaluation that staff are undertaking to develop a recommendation and finalized business case for Ottawa's future waste management system, staff be directed to undertake a market sounding exercise that invites proponents to provide information to city staff related to the council-approved scenarios outlined in Recommendation 2 of the Waste Management Technologies Feasibility Study Report, Status Quo, Private Facilities, Waste to Energy Incineration Facility, and construct a new landfill. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Are there any other motions or directions at this time? Okay, we will move to the delegations then, and we will begin with Jennifer Van Kaunet. Good morning. Morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hello and good morning, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate Councillor Skalski's motions. It really echoes a lot of the points that I want to make here. But I will start by stating that I'm against the City of Ottawa purchasing the Capital Region Resource Recovery Centre. When my husband and I first decided to move into this quiet rural setting, I was impressed by the quality of life we were enjoying. And only after 4 years, and only a few meters away, we were bombarded with the endless construction of the hydro transfer station for the purpose that will be surrounded by a satellite city. And now, to make things worse, when I walk my dog, I'll be smelling the dump. The city has not been transparent, and I recognize that you acknowledge that, so I appreciate that. And it's only given the citizens a few weeks to discuss this important issue at hand. And even more well-versed groups such as Dump This, Dump 2 and Dump the Dump are scrambling. So with the lack of transparency, so how much it's going to cost the land and licenses, and not having a plan of how much it's going to cost to build the landfill, it's hard to put trust into this process. The City of Ottawa has taken on massive debt loads with Lansdowne, with Taywin, and ongoing issues with the LRT, and I question how much more debt we can accept. The taxes have already been raised above what was promised to us, and we have now taken on more debt with the before mentioned, and with the economic climate the city is about to go into, with the federal public service being downsized. I question where this money will come from and how much it will increase our taxes in the future. The solid waste master plan has laid out 3 options: sending the waste to private facilities, building waste energy, and building a new greenfield landfill process to process residential waste. And I understand this acquisition came up before the deadline of 2027, where the options will be discussed. And the land acquisition is being poised as a gem and a rarity due to its license. However, this is putting option 3 as the front runner without time to explore incineration or sending waste to private facilities. Of the 3 options, paying a fee to send waste to private facilities is the most cost effective. And from the announcement that the city may purchase this land until today, it has not been a significant amount of time to be able to understand the risks of what would happen. And to put it into perspective, Lansdowne had 7 years to come to a final conclusion of a $419 million deal. Something I would like to ask city staff is why we would be buying a recovery center when recycling is now being run by the province. And from my understanding, in order to have a landfill at this location, a material recycling facility must be built in order to operate the landfill. From my understanding, the landfill is very small, and as I heard earlier, it will be about half. And so how long will this last, and will we be in the same position in 15 years, having to find a new solution once this landfill fills up? Hasty decisions have put the city in this position before, where certain projects have been approved in their initial stages, leading to subsequent councils feeling handcuffed to the decisions of their predecessors. As I said, I understand the land acquisitions happen behind closed doors often within the city, but I have yet to see one of this magnitude with this higher price tag and this long-term effects. And without being able to ask city staff direct questions of the impact of this decision and to see the cost and benefit analysis of the 3 options, it's a no from me, my family, my neighbors, and the community of Carlsbad Springs to purchase the Capital Region Resource Recovery Center. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Thanks for being here and expressing your concerns with us. I'm wondering, your neighbors and the community association nearby, have they taken a position on this and come together and talked about it?
Yes, there's going to be a couple people delegating today, and I know that the Carlsbad Community Association sent in a letter saying that they don't want it based on the environmental and the health risks that are happening, as well as it might not have been licensed properly, that we might not even be able to build a facility here. So buying this land might not be as great as you think it is.
And then based on the mayor's comments to begin the meeting around the fact that someone else could own this landfill and have waste trucked in from outside of city limits and then not have control over say the types of groups that have been meeting on around this site. Is that some comfort in that there's a site plan to come and the city would be an owner of it rather than say an outside source?
I do see that perspective. And I'm happy that Councillor Skalski had mentioned, because if a private owner were to own it, we would get the community benefits. We would, with the Nav and Dump, they have Friends of Mayor Blue who give them money. And so if Skalski's motion passes, we will get that community benefit. So that is a worry for us. If the city owns it, we won't get any benefits from it. Yes, we might have more control and more transparency, but I don't know if I'd have to make the argument that you will be a better neighbor because why? Just because we have more control over it, but we're not getting any benefits back from the city.
Okay, I appreciate your perspective. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts today. We'll go next to Emma Bainbridge from Cafes, who I believe is online. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you to the Finance and Corporate Services Committee for having me today. I'm Emma, and I work as the Communications and Community Engagement Coordinator at Cafes Ottawa. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about our recommendations and then giving some background context on how we see the different options for this site under city ownership. Next slide, please. So to start with, I'm going to go through the recommendations that Cafes has come to after researching this deal and talking with our members, including Carlsbad Spring residents and Waste Watch Ottawa. So first of all, we recommend that the city pursue the bid to acquire the Taggart Miller site. Second of all, the city continue to prolong the life of the Trail Road facility and only resort to a new landfill once Trail Road reaches capacity, which at this point should be 2055 or later if the city, with the measures to prolong the life. And in collaboration with Portage Power, the city explores 20-year IESO contracts to generate revenue in the interim through ground mount solar, as there's a hydro corridor within 2 kilometers of the site, and robust public consultation before developing the site, regardless of the use or technology, especially with residents of Carlsbad Springs, and to use the municipal development process to ensure that the new landfill uses the best technologies and practices to minimize risk to the environment and nearby communities, in particular for air pollution and leachate. And finally, that the city commit to not accepting waste from outside of Ottawa. Next slide, please. So we know that the city is currently in phase 2 of the bidding process to acquire the site, and the city has put measures underway to prolong the life of trail roads, such as the three bag limit for waste, potential expansion of the site, and I believe refusing to accept commercial waste. And the CRRC does already have provincial permits, which would speed up the process compared to building a new landfill from scratch. But it's also important to consider the city is located in the Bear Brook watershed and also near the planned Taywin development, which those two developments together could put a lot of stress on the community of Carlsbad Springs. Next. So there are 3 options. The city of Ottawa, they could own it. It could be another municipality or a private company. If it's not the city of Ottawa, then it means that this will not really be a solution to increasing Ottawa's waste capacity, as the waste going into the landfill would likely be brought from outside, so either from another municipality or like from a private company's clients, who could ship it in from anywhere basically. And we also, when there are, the private company could sell the land after acquiring it, and there would be very like limited recourse for or control for the city of Ottawa or local residents to intervene. So next slide, please. So that's why we believe that public ownership of the landfill is in the best interests of the city and its residents, because the city of Ottawa would be the most accountable to Ottawa taxpayers. And with public ownership, there would be an incentive to reduce the waste going into the landfill, because with less waste going in, that means that the life of the landfill is extended. Whereas in contrast, like private landfills often collect tipping fees, so it's more profitable for them to have more waste going into the landfill, which undermines waste reduction goals. And so the city owning this landfill would have lower long-term solid waste management costs for Ottawa, and there would be no risk of legal battles with private waste contractors. Next slide. So options for the use of the site include, in addition to a landfill, include an incinerator and an ash landfill, or
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're at time, unfortunately.
All right.
We'll have to leave it there. Councillor Menard.
I'll just ask briefly. Thanks, Mayor. On the potentials for the site, I understand. Sorry, you're online. I understand that as it stands right now, there would be provincial approval needed for incineration on the site, and that either way, the city, whichever it goes into the future, whether it's another landfilling or incineration or gas capture, that a landfill is required in the city for all of those functions. So perhaps you can just give me your thoughts on the current existing use of the site.
Yes, we don't actually advocate for the idea of an incinerator, particularly because an incinerator still requires a landfill or some kind of landfill to use to dispose of bottom ash. So our preferred solution would be to use the site as a landfill, but only to use it once Trail Road has reached capacity. So if Trail Road, that would still leave about like 20 years where the site is not being used as a landfill. And we think that in the interim, that site could be used to generate revenue, like for example, through solar energy.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll go next to Sous-Langlois, Lucie Regembol from the Capital Region Citizens Coalition for the Protection of the Environment. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and committee members. My name is Sue Langlois. I'm speaking today as president of the Capital Region Citizens Coalition for the Protection of the Environment, a community-based organization representing residents of Carlsbad Springs and surrounding areas impacted by the Boundary Road Waste Processing Facility. With me is Lucie Regembald. We've been involved in this project for 12 plus years now. When the CRRC was originally proposed, it was presented as a recycling first facility with a catchment for residual waste, with obligations in the EA approval on recycling, a concept very different from what is potentially now under consideration by the City of Ottawa, which is to purchase the property for use as primarily as a landfill. While it may look good on paper, the city would be acquiring a stalled, incomplete project with numerous unresolved issues and significant risks. We are here today to express our opposition to the city's purchase of the Boundary Road land for a dump. There are several key concerns. If we could go to slides, sorry. Next. Number one, despite request from community, no detailed human health impact assessment study has been conducted, leaving health risks to residents in downstream communities unaddressed. A comprehensive health impact study must be completed before any development takes place. Number two, Lita clay underlying the site poses significant engineering challenges. The soil type is highly unstable and unsuitable for heavy landfill operations without costly mitigation. One only has to look down the road to the Ottawa Hydro Municipal Transformer Station being built on Piperville, which demonstrates the technical difficulties encountered and resulting financial impact. The city needs to ensure to go into this with eyes wide open. Number three, leachate management and environmental risks. The original design lacked a landfill liner, a basic environmental safeguard, and provided no finalized leachate management plan. Since there are no sewage drains at this site, the leachate will need to be trucked off-site to a processing facility. At what costs? Without proper systems, contaminated water would threaten local wells, livestock, and waterways. Remediation costs and liability will fall squarely on the city. Comprehensive leachate management plans must be identified and the impacts thoroughly described and modeled and costed before this project could proceed. Number four, the city is considering this purchase under a silent bidding process. Are taxpayers potentially paying the highest possible price for an incomplete project? The public is being asked to comment on a city purchase without costs being revealed. This rushed approach lacks transparency and due diligence. Has the city assessed full costs, including construction operations and particularly risk mitigation? There are many questions, unresolved items, and issues with the site that require full assessment prior to making this critical decision, which will be binding on the citizens of Ottawa.
Next slide. There's no demonstrated need for new landfill. Within 5 minutes of the proposed site, a GFL transfer facility exists. And 30 minutes away, GFL Environmental operates a major waste management complex with over 1,000 acres. Approved for use, offering services in solid waste management, liquid waste management, and soil remediation. GFL has the capacity and infrastructure to manage Ottawa's waste at significantly lower cost. Has this option been fully evaluated? Have other options for handling waste been evaluated? Next slide. On behalf of the Ottawa taxpayers, we urge the Finance and Corporate Services Committee to, one, put the pause on the purchase process immediately, conduct a public review of all financial, environmental, and health implications, ensure full transparency before committing millions of dollars to a project fraught with uncertainty, money the city doesn't have. Ottawa cannot afford another costly misstep. The city must act responsibly, explore alternatives, and prioritize sustainable waste management solutions over outdated landfill strategies. In the end, Carlsbad Spring residents have been assaulted by several events in the last 5 years. We will lose our quiet rural setting with the Towin development, a city of 45,000 people. Then 75,000 trees were removed at night without city permits. And to top it all off, we are now going from what we thought was a recycling facility with a small landfill to a full-fledged landfill for residential garbage. We want that the city treats us with a little bit more respect. I would like to know how a city planner could conceivably design a zero-carbon, one-planet, green, sustainable model city such as Towin, based on Algonquin values, and then place a dump a short distance away.
Unfortunately, that's time.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Councillor Skalski.
I just wanted to take a second and thank you both for being here today. I know you're both very vocal advocates in the community and have been on this issue for many, many years. So thank you sincerely for your time today, for coming out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. We'll go next to Duncan Burry from Waste Watch Ottawa. Good morning. Just push the button at the base of the microphone there.
Good morning. Thank you very much. So first slide, please, move on. So Waste Watch Ottawa urges you to proceed with the acquisition of a Taggart Miller Capital Region Resource Recovery Centre on Boundary Road. Next slide, please. So why? We've already heard a lot of the reasons for that from the mayor and the general manager for public works, and we would certainly concur that a publicly owned landfill is preferred over a private site because the city can determine and restrict what waste to accept and from where, control site development and timing, and coordinate with trail road expansion and operation, avoid exposure to private pricing and control costs, ensure the highest environmental standards, and ensure that public oversight, transparency, and consistency with the solid waste master plan. And those are all things I heard in terms of the extra motions that the council have presented. Next slide, please. So I certainly recognize that there's been considerable local opposition and concern about this over the 15 years of the environmental assessment process, and there were legitimate concerns raised about issues such as off-site leachate migration, groundwater contamination, and truck traffic. The fact the purchase price is unknown to the public is understandable, and there's a need for confidentiality and negotiations such as this. So I'm not at all surprised that that's what's the situation. Next slide, please. So if a site is fully permitted integrated waste management facility, a new environmental assessment process does not need to be undertaken. The city will have control through site planning controls on the actual operation of the site. It has provincial approval for the wide range of landfilling options that we've already heard about, and it involves and allows operational flexibility with the trail road landfill site. And I think I heard the general manager talk about issues related to trucking. The landfill can be developed, engineered, and operated to manage and mitigate environmental impacts. And I would argue strongly that the city has the experience as the operator of the trail road landfill site to operate a new landfill to the highest standards. Next slide, please. In terms of life expectancy of Trail Road, we have a considerably large amount of capacity here pending. If we add this particular site, we've got in the excess of 60 years, which is just almost unheard of in terms of landfill capacity. With the expansion and plans for the new lift at Trail Road, which will be approved and obviously subject to provincial approval, that will basically just what at Trail Road give us 30 years, and this will give us another 30. So this is frankly almost in case of large cities in Canada, probably almost unheard of that we would have that. It's a luxury, and we're very lucky to have this opportunity. Next slide, please. A successful purchase will provide this extra time. The purchase is a one-time opportunity and avoids a contentious and lengthy landfill site selection process. And as I mentioned, I think the city would be in a very unique position nationally in terms of its capacity to manage its waste and having the options for landfill. Next slide, please. I'm not a particular fan of landfills. I'm not particularly a fan of incineration. We've got a waste management problem in this country and this world, but the reality is we're going to need to have some disposal capacity. So given the options between the two, and I know this is going to be reviewed and is being discussed with the feasibility work, which is going forward that the general manager Public Works referred to, but on balance, a landfill is preferred. And so why is that? The mitigation can be addressed and managed on site. The methane can be captured, as in fact it is at Trail Road, and producing less greenhouse gases than an incinerator. And that was something the staff, in fact, emphasized when the report from June was released. Enhanced green bin collection, which is something you need to do a lot more work on, but further reduce greenhouse gases associated. So this will all help meet the city's issues related to climate change. And landfills come with a built-in incentive not to fill them. Incinerators, you have to keep feeding waste to it. Landfill is also cheaper, and again, the city study says that if you just build a new landfill, you're about $100 million sort of safer and cheaper than an incinerator. Final slide, please. So regardless of all of this, the city needs to aggressively maintain its work and action on diversion organics. And having landfill capacity should not be an excuse to pull up on the accelerator on that. And so just in conclusion, I would say I would echo the comments, and support the comments of the mayor and the general manager of Public Works that this is a purchase which in fact is prudent and should go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Duncan. I appreciate the last slide. Those are good reminders. But I wanted to ask you, private landfills versus public landfills. Are you aware of the track record on regulatory compliance or environmental compliance. Is public better in that regard than private? Are you aware of any comparisons or data?
Good question, Councillor. Nothing immediately springs to mind. I think the issue really comes down to transparency and openness. I think that's the big difference. We don't really know exactly what's going on a day-to-day basis at the private sites and the ones within the region as well. Not to suggest that they're being badly managed, but the fact of the matter is, if you own the site and you're reporting back to to committee and to the public, you've got all the opportunity to see and be open. So no, I don't have anything on the top of my mind that I can address that question, but it's a good question to ask.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Gower's question with respect to the pros and cons of trucking our waste to a private landfill as opposed to one we own. Are there any other negative aspects? I'm wondering, for example, how the cost compares over the long term.
For a private site versus a...
Yeah, if we were to send our waste to...
Well, I think the problem is you don't control the price, right? So the landfill operator sets the tipping fee. Now, presumably, if you use a private site, you would enter into some kind of contract for the long term, as long as you could, in terms of a tipping fee. You would have to pay to access the site. But I don't know whether a landfill operator would give you a 30-year sort of, contract to handle waste. It seems unlikely. So you could imagine that there could be over time some, renegotiations of a tipping fee that you would have to pay. So I think factually that leaves you with an exposure to a risk and a price escalation that you probably should avoid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Mr. Burry, thank you very much for your presentation. Next is Robert Leth. Good morning. Just turn on the microphone if you would, sir. It's right there's a button in front of you at the base of the, there you go.
Got it. Excuse my technical inability. First of all, before I get started, I'd like to thank City Hall and the councillors for going the route of not doing this behind closed doors. That makes a huge difference. My name is Robert Leth. Excuse me. My name is Robert Leth, and I'm the managing director of a company called NH3 Canada. We work internationally doing renewable energy and sustainability projects. And if nothing else, I bring a perspective of what is currently going on in Europe and the agencies and the projects we're dealing with there. Just to get started, the next slide. For a number of reasons, we support the idea of acquiring this site. When people speak of 15 years of approval, that sounds a bit mind-boggling. We regularly work on projects like wind farm projects that take 5 to 8 years to do 6 months of construction. Time is not on our side for these types of projects, and acquiring this site fully permitted not only provides us with a golden opportunity, the first, so as it's been correctly pointed out, the first one that has reached that stage in the last 20 years in this province. But aside from the way that City Council is proceeding anyway with options under the master plan, which basically have boiled down to 2 varieties, which is landfills or waste to energy. The one thing that's missing here is any pricing that goes with the cost of this particular site. But even without that information, we are aware of several other proponents who are interested in acquiring and operating this site. And I would just like to point out that it is indeed a matter of if the if the city of Ottawa does not acquire this property, that somebody else will. It's actually a little more tenuous than that, and that is even if the city decides to pursue this, you'll be in direct competition with other entities. So I'd just like to state that obvious. Using more modern technology than the ones currently that have been considered under the master plan, there are a number of parties that have determined that this is a bit of a gold mine to operate as a business that will be net profitable. And again, being in the industry, we are. This is not the time and place today to consider newer forms of waste to energy, but that is what we do under full disclosure. And we welcome that this acquisition would give us some breathing room to not have to make decisions that we're going to have to live with for the next 15 years. As a lot of, I appreciate that the city has a bit of an aversion to unproven technologies. That is all well known, but there are a number of technologies that we can identify that will be proven and be visitable and are worth considering in the next year or two. And we would gladly like to direct you to that. And out of pure self-interest, the company that has the most efficient solution with the best numbers and the highest possibility of profitability with no emissions whatsoever, plus eliminating all microplastics and PFAS, is our company. And that company has operations in Denmark. We are based in Canada. Our headquarters, because we work closely with the federal government right now, are now in Ottawa. And Mr. Leeper, you're our counselor. So if you'd like to bring this technology to the rest of the world, we're talking to them and they're interested. And it would be delightful to talk to a project that didn't have to get on a plane first. So just moving forward quickly, next slide, please. The pros and cons all have to do with the, I think they've all been stated here. I don't want to revisit that, but for us, the most major one is that it gives us all time to consider more recent technologies. It should be pointed out that, like all other technology, the acceleration is incredible. So
that's time, unfortunately.
That's time.
Yeah.
I thank you for your time, and I look forward to following up. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. Next is Patrick Bellac. Patrick Bellac? No? Okay. Harry Baker? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Harry Baker. I'm with the Citizens Environmental Stewardship Association east of Ottawa. And 15 years ago, we started a campaign called Dump the Dump Now, when this landfill was going to be installed at a quarry site just in the north part of Russell Township. And then it got moved over to Boundary Road, and we got involved with the Carlsbad group that you've already heard from. Could I have the next slide, please? This is a picture of the site as it appears now, except what's missing is the Amazon warehouse at the end, all built on piles. And you can see forests, you can see some farmers' fields, and there's a wetland as well that's difficult to see. So the road that goes along across the bottom is the Vine Road. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Some technical difficulties. There we go. Yeah, that one, please. Thank you. This is the design that was proposed by Taggart Miller. You notice that it's at least 2/3 of the site was going to be taken up by the landfill. If you're going to get rid of the material recycling, you probably could extend that landfill bigger. But all the structures that were going to be built on this site had to be on piles because there's 30 meters of clay underneath there. Next slide, please. So here's my question. Taggart Miller's had 7 to 8 years after receiving provincial approval and city rezoning. Why haven't they started construction? Next slide, please. Well, I think it's because of the sensitive needle clay on the site. 30 meters of very weak, highly compressible, and sensitive needle clay. I referred to some reports there that has qualified this site for a landfill and incinerator back in the 1980s when it was designated as Site 10. And I believe that was the time when the Trail Road site was chosen over above this site. Next, please. So why was it disqualified? Well, it was disqualified because of these 30 meters of sensitive clay. You can read it. I'm not going to go through it all because there isn't enough time. Next site, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. The only thing that's built on the site that we can see is this little test road. Whether it was for drilling, a drill pad or whatever, it's hard to say, but it's actually built on piles. So I don't know. Are they planning to build roads on piles because it's so sensitive? I don't know. That's a question for Taggart Miller. But it's very highly compressible clay, and they're expecting 6 to 8 meters of settlement underneath the landfill. Next slide, please. There's a potential for this clay during an earthquake to liquefy. So here's a picture showing a sample of clay being loaded, static load, and then once it's disturbed, you can see it behaves like a liquid. This is why we have landslides in the Ottawa Valley area in this clay. Next slide, please. Earthquake concern. So liquefaction would come if there was an earthquake. A catastrophic failure of the landfill would occur. Next slide, please. This is looking at the significant earthquakes in the past. We're in the west, the bottom part there, what's called the West Quebec seismic zone. There's been significant earthquakes in the recent times. Next one, please. There also was a significant earthquake not far from the site between Vars and Navan in 1861. Next slide, please. Because of this, the Geological Survey looked at all of the soil conditions in the Ottawa city, and they classified them based on how they would be affected by an earthquake. And the site that we're looking at, you can see is in that red zone over on the east side. It is the most weak soil in the whole region. All that red is the weakest soil, so that includes Orleans and most of eastern part of Ottawa. Next slide, please. So what's the concern? This is not recommended for a site for a landfill. It wasn't adequate in the 1980s, and I believe it's not adequate here. Wouldn't take much of an earthquake in order for this to have significant problems. Next slide, please. So this talks about the classes of soil, as we saw in that map previously, and what effects are the greatest shaking from an earthquake. What I want you to understand is when you have 30 meters of clay, and there's a little bit of movement in the ground, bedrock underneath, there's an amplification effect. So on the surface of 30 meters, it's a lot more shaking than at the bottom. That's what this shows.
Time, sir.
I'm sorry?
That's time,
yes,
unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Next is Pamela O'Donnell. Oh, sorry, we do have a question. Do you have a question, Councillor Skalski?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask you, you spent much of your delegation talking about the land and the soil and the concerns, but what are the implications if there was a landfill built and something like ultimately there was shaking or something had occurred? What are the implications to the surrounding area that you've been trying to raise attention to?
So in the agreement or the provincial acceptance of this as a landfill, there's a requirement that if there is any seismic activity, that the owners of the landfill have to do a very extensive evaluation. And so one of the issues is this landfill was not planned to have a liner. Most modern landfills have liners. But even with a liner, they usually put pipes underneath the landfill because they want to capture the leachate that's coming down. So this is water percolating down through the garbage, picking up the contaminants, and then they try to extract it with these pipes underneath. And then they have to deal with that leachate some way to purify it in order to dispose of it. But so that piping system is under great strain. If there's any large settlements, I mentioned 6 to 8 meters of settlement under a 16-meter pile of garbage, and any movement would also affect any liner that's placed there and the integrity of this piping system at the bottom of the landfill. And you can bet they're not going to want to have to dig up that landfill to redo that piping system.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer.
Thank you. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, sir, for your delegation today. I'm certainly not an expert in landfill acquisition, let alone the creation of new landfills. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around, there are probably criteria that a provincial government would use to deny a request to create a landfill. And so my question to you is, if the threat of earthquakes pose a significant enough risk to the general public,
yes,
why, in your opinion, would they have approved a landfill to be established here to begin with?
I'm afraid that's something you're going to have to ask the province.
Okay.
So am I able to reference a slide that I have later on that would answer some of this question? Mr. Chair, would I be allowed to?
Can we put the slide on the screen?
Number 16, please. Titled 2070 Provincial Approval. This is what I was saying about earlier, that in the approval for this site, it was required that within 24 hours of a seismic occurrence, the proponent would have a person qualified to do evaluation, do an immediate inspection. And this was concerned to the things that would make this landfill safe being compromised in an earthquake. So the province did recognize it, but it wasn't enough for them to disqualify the plans.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the delegation. I don't believe this is a subject that I've heard discussed at all in how this file has been developed. I was wondering if you're at all able to perhaps send, or maybe your slide deck is already available to us. If you can see my name there, if you could send that slide deck to my attention, I wouldn't mind taking a close peek at it. But the questions I had for you, you were saying that even though Taggart Miller has owned this site for quite some time, they have not yet developed it on their own as a landfill. Does that mean that your theory on this is that because of these soil sensitive concerns, that might be the reason why they themselves did not develop this as a landfill privately?
The reason for my presentation today is to say, in your due diligence, please look into everything, because I believe that Taggart Miller found this site too risky and too expensive and a bad investment for public funds, I would say today. But the problem is long-term operation as well. It isn't just the construction. As I said, everything has to be built on piles. The landfill obviously can't be built on piles. So there's some real concerns about how fast it's built up and what are the implications of that. But also the fact that in the long term, because just remember, landfills never go away. It's not a thing that's there for 30 years and it disappears. So it's going to be there forever, whether it's being actively filled or whether it's sitting there and just generating gas, if you will, and that has to be dealt with. But in the long term, these landfills will continue to pollute, if they're able to, into the groundwater and off-site.
I have two more questions. One, I know from what I've learned about what we do with our trail site that we have systems in place that try to remove as much of the leachate or remove as much of the gas emissions through pipes that we run through it, and I'm not an expert on it at all, but was I understanding from your delegation that if we were to do with this landfill, if we were to develop a landfill on this site with the sensitive clay underneath it, and if we were to put the same kinds of pipes or filtration systems underneath this site, that those systems could be prone to damage and therefore not working because of the increased chance of earthquake. Is that what you were basically saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay. And then my next question, when you were talking about whether this site had, in addition to those systems being more prone to damage from the potential of earthquakes, are you saying because of this site being on clay, that there's a greater chance of, as you said, liquefaction? And would that mean that should earthquakes cause damage to those filtering systems, that would increase the likelihood of more contaminants getting into the groundwater or the surrounding areas?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to try to find out who you are so I can get a copy of your slide deck. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much. And the copy of the presentation is in the SharePoint site for our colleagues' edification. But so the question that we've been told we're grappling with today is not should this be operated as a landfill, but who's going to operate it as a landfill.
Yes.
I guess I'm wondering how you feel about the potential that a private or another organization would operate it as a landfill versus being operated in the public interest by the city of Ottawa.
So our concerns were with a private company that was proposing to operate a landfill, but never built the landfill. And so I don't see it any different whether another private company would take it over or whether the city takes it over. To me, it's a bad investment. Right. And if I was a banker, I wouldn't be loaning money to a company that wants to build a landfill on that site.
So I think if I were to translate that, the risk that you would ask us to do is if we don't acquire this site, you feel that that is a calculated risk and no one will operate the site moving forward.
Again, I believe that's the way it is, but I can't speak for another company that may just go ahead anyway. I mean, I think Ottawa is trying to do their due diligence here. And if I was going to make a recommendation, I think a risk analysis of the long-term performance of this landfill, particularly, should be something that should be added to your list going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker. Next is Pamela O'Donnell.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. I have a couple of slides that I would ask to get put up. I'll just introduce myself because I'm Pamela O'Donnell. I'm a resident of Carlsbad Springs, and you've seen me come to committee a couple of times, different committees, because I retired last year after over 30 years as a diplomat. But about 9 of those years was spent working on environmental issues, including being responsive director for sustainable development. So I spent a lot of time promoting best practices and ensuring legislation was met. So slide 2, please. So I do appreciate that this is difficult, and I want to share some of the things I think you need to consider before you make the decision. And I am concerned that it's a rushed decision, and that doesn't always go well in the long term. So the first thing is, of course, the community is opposed. You know that. I won't go into that. I wanted to reiterate that this decision can't be taken in isolation. It comes on top of urban boundary expansion, Taywin, clear cutting, and all of these things that have a cumulative negative impact on the community. And if you look at those land sites that I just mentioned, that's the equivalent of 2,648 acres of land that is currently serving an ecological purpose disappearing. So that needs to be considered. The scope of the environmental assessment was, as you said, in 2017, I believe it was, and it did not include municipal solid waste. So all of those impacts were not considered. It was presented as a recycling facility with some residual waste. And so I think that is very important that if the city proceeds, that your process identifies those gaps. It is within the Bear Brook watershed, which has already been mentioned. It's ecologically significant, has provincially significant wetlands. It has groundwater recharge areas that provide the drinking water for other communities. There are water concerns of nearby residents, and that is critical. Most in that area rely on well water, so any contamination could be a disaster. And then it could also lead to a polluted food supply, as many farms are in the area. Leda clay has already been mentioned. It's unstable, and it creates a higher risk. I won't go into it. Technical experts know more. But my conclusion on this is, if we're talking landfill versus incineration, incineration is not a preferable option. There's many negative impacts, including the need to landfill toxic ash arising from that. So I would refer all of you to look at Waste Watch Ottawa's website, because they have some really good information on incineration. And so my conclusion was that city ownership of any landfill is preferable to the private sector. And that's because of the higher accountability to Ottawa citizens, and hopefully your willingness to demonstrate best environmental practices. Whereas a privately owned facility carries the risk of waste from elsewhere being trucked in without solving Ottawa's waste challenges. So go to slide 3. So within that, I wanted to make a few recommendations if this is to proceed. I think you should conduct a new environmental assessment that considers the full scope of the project, as well as taking into account the results of the Bear Brook watershed study. And there is an opportunity to address those gaps through the city's process. So you should conduct a human health assessment. That's already been mentioned. It was not originally done, and it's best practice to do one. I would like the city to commit to only use the site once the Trail Road landfill has reached full capacity, and consider other uses in the interim. And it's already been mentioned, the suggestion to use it to generate renewable energy. And I think that's a good idea. City could get some income from it in the meantime. I would like you to ensure neighboring residents have access to clean water, whether that's extending the city water system or some other method of doing that. But with the high risks with the Leda clay and seismic activity, I think you'd want to take that precaution ahead of time before people's well water is negatively impacted. I would expect the city to use the newest technologies. And if you actually delay a little bit because you finish using up the Trail Road landfill, that will allow you the time to come up with the best technologies and look at what's new and minimize all of those environmental impacts. And I'd love to see the city of Ottawa have a state-of-the-art facility that we could showcase as the nation's capital. I would like you to commit to never accepting toxic material at this site. As you say, there's enough risks there. Don't add toxic material into that. And I would like the committee to not accept waste from outside of Ottawa. If this is going to proceed, it needs to be a solution for Ottawa. If we're going to bear the consequences and the risks, it needs to be a solution for our waste. And I would like the city to not forget about continuing and accelerating the work to reduce the material going to landfills in Ottawa. So to conclude, I would say that I support the motions that were put forward by Councillor Skalski, but I would also urge caution in rushing into any decisions on this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Next is Haydon McCannell. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm just going to pull some notes up. My name is Haydon McCannell. I've been a resident homeowner in Blackburn for almost a decade now. Previous to that, I lived on my family's farm in Vars, so within the same sort of area as this is proposed to be developed. I'd like to state first and foremost that I'm against the city acquiring this land, and I see everybody continuing to refer to it as a fully permitted landfill site. My understanding is a lot of the permits are conditional. A lot of them are still in process or perhaps not even started yet. So with the number of conditions that are not met or sort of in process but not finished, I think we might have a bit of a sort of bad perspective on some of this. It's not ready to receive waste anytime soon. And I believe there's a number of factors that mean it's not necessarily suitable to ever be a landfill site. So I am familiar with this land and the plan that Taggart Miller had for it. Dump the Dump has raised many good points. They've sort of been introduced and shown around. My mother was a very involved person from the get-go when the initial site was introduced in Russell Township, and then this site shortly thereafter. They received significant pushback from the community at the time when this was initially proposed. And my understanding, and from the discussions I've had with people that still live in the area, community sentiment hasn't changed. Nobody wants a landfill here. Not now, not ever, not public, not private. It's just not a good idea. However, this particular committee meeting is about mostly money, right? Finance committee, should we acquire this? Building on a previously made point of Taggart and Miller have owned this facility now for north of a decade. They have had many years from their first conditional approval to start some sort of construction. They didn't receive a approved site plan from this city's own planning committee. They were never able to fulfill a bunch of the obligations set before them in a cost-effective manner. And given the resources available to them as humongous private companies, do we truly believe that as a city we can take on the debt and that we have the engineering required to meet those same obligations? They would have done it before now. They would have been turning a profit by now if it was doable. Secondly, I sincerely question the secrecy and the rush. How much will this ultimately cost Ottawa taxpayers? I understand you signed NDAs. Why enter into an agreement that requires this kind of secrecy in the first place? As a tax-paying citizen, I am appalled that we sort of got 2 weeks of notice that we're already at stage 2, that it seems like we've been kind of ignored, that we just decided the city is going to do this on their own and then sort of tell everyone after the fact. As somebody, I want to know where my money's going. I want to know that it is being invested intelligently and with the best implications for the city and its residents going forward. Thirdly, I'd like to touch on community factors. The initial proposal and subsequent environmental assessment for this project was completed near a decade ago, and factors have changed since then. A school in Carlsbad Springs has opened, the Canada Knowledge Academy. I don't think anyone else has mentioned it yet, but that is important. That is within the range that this possible new facility would exist. That has to be taken into account. The nearby towns of Russell and Embrun have seen tremendous growth with many new houses being built, and the commercial park that would be neighboring this has also grown with the aforementioned construction of the Amazon warehouse. How would this affect them? There needs to be a new assessment. There has to be a ground up new proposal, new permits done, because we are in a very different state than when this entire project was first started. Thirdly, the initially stipulated consultation of 6 different Aboriginal communities about this project. Have they been contacted and consulted about this potential sale and potential change of plans? Lastly is a lack of clarity on several secondary issues. A lot of people have brought up waste to energy and incinerators. The initial conditional permits strictly forbid the burning of waste on this site. So you'd have to do a costly and lengthy amendment to those permits, go through the province for this, and I believe that that would tie this whole thing up longer. And as such, it's just not worth it. Additionally, they also stipulate a specific range from which we would be able to accept waste already. A lot of people are concerned about it coming in from outside city limits. The small townships around Ottawa, I don't think would contribute that much outside of what the city itself generates. There is already, again, in the existing conditional permits, strict limits on where the waste can come from. The leachate, I believe ROPEC initially was contacted about accepting some of the pre-processed liquid waste from this. They never settled on an amount. I don't know if they are still willing to accept that. Again, all of this is years, almost a decade old. I think we need to relook at this. In conclusion, I think there's a lot of factors, some of which I've gone over, some of which I don't have time for. I'm conscious that I'm now over time.
Yeah.
But I believe that this is a bad idea, largely because it's just financially irresponsible to blindly buy a distressed developer asset, and the process is a slap in the face to the taxpaying public who deserve transparent communication and planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Thanks for coming to present to committee. I just wonder your views on the future for waste handling in Ottawa, given Trail Road is hopefully going to be extended as much as we can, based on new limits and some of the work that staff have done. In the future, though, what suggestions might you have for council in handling waste, and where?
My understanding is that there was an application to double the size of Trail Road or near to it. If this is approved, that would give us, in theory, another 20 plus years, given the mitigation factors that have been taken on, the 3-bag limit, the refusal of IC&I waste, and several others. I think we can get more than that out of the expanded space. Now that's kicking the can down the road a little bit, I recognize, but I think that is a good first step. And I think rushing into this in a panic doesn't help anybody.
There has been an application by the city to have a slight expansion. I guess from your perspective, if the city were to move forward with acquiring this particular site we're talking about today, starting operations on there in the future, so that there's the time to go through exactly what you've talked about, the permitting issues, some of the EA, the pieces that are the leachate. It would make sense, I assume, from your perspective, to not have that site up and operating until we've extended and expanded our Trail Road capacity.
In the instance where the city does acquire this site, then yes, I would like to see Trail Road used to its maximum potential before anything else is even started. There is a slight secondary issue with that. I didn't quite have time to touch on it, but the permits that exist for this site expire in 2027 anyways, if no construction is made, and no major construction has been made because they never had a finalized site plan. So at that point, we need a brand new EA anyways, we need new permits anyways, and all of this starts from square one. Everyone says, oh, it's perfect, it's fully permitted, but I think it's just not a good investment.
Okay, well, I certainly have questions for staff around it. I appreciate you being here with us today and the work that your mom did on it previously. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Skalski.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask a question. You mentioned the catchment area, that there was an understanding by residents that the licenses today would only allow for bringing in waste from a certain catchment area. Is that generally the understanding that residents have in the community already with what's licensed there?
People that are familiar with this project that I've spoken to are aware that, yeah, the existing permits sort of allow the city of Ottawa and then, yeah, the small surrounding townships. So I believe that is known.
So the idea of coming in from Montreal or Quebec or Toronto feels like that's well outside of the catchment area as residents understand it.
Yes, people kind of know that that's not allowed or shouldn't be allowed without, again, extensive and costly reevaluation and going back to the province again.
Thank you. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me, I just want to get a little bit of clarity from the delegate. Oftentimes, we're hearing things about this project that we just didn't know because it's happening so quickly. When I heard you say that the existing permits expire in 2027, I wouldn't mind getting a little bit more of an understanding of that. Is that the permit to develop the site as a landfill? Is that permit is not connected to what the site is permitted to do as in terms of licensing, is it?
I'm not a subject matter expert on this, but having read the permit, my understanding is that if there is no significant construction towards the facilities that it's conditionally permitted to have, that the permit does expire, and that means that it cannot be a landfill without going through the entire process again and getting reapproval from the province, is my understanding of having read it.
Okay, well, I'll get clarity from staff on that because that would seem like a big obstacle, but I'll get clarity on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Of course, thank you for your time.
Next is Charlotte Greer. Good morning. You have to turn on your microphone. There's a button right in front of you.
Sorry, good morning. I'm kind of shocked to be sitting here again. My first involvement with this site started back in the 1980s. What I brought today were all of the reports that were being produced at that time for the satellite city. And I'm sure planning, your engineers, they're all quite well aware of this site. They're all quite aware of the restrictions on this site. And it's interesting to me that Taggart, who builds infrastructure, wants to sell this site, particularly since it's supposed to make a lot of money because it's a landfill. But you're going to have a lot of problems with this site in the long term. And you're buying this thing like buying a house without an inspection. You need a cost-benefit analysis on the long-term impact of operating the site. There are serious technical issues. A lot of people that have come before me have identified things that I would have said. I'm not a NIMBY, but during the process of 1984, I may have started off like that. But at the end of the day, the information that we provided extended the life and the landfill at Trail Road. Now, this information about the site has been there for many years, and yet it was rezoned. Now, we've backed our way into this process. This is not an open process. There was no public information coming forward on where we are now. We were just told this morning that it was done behind the scenes. This is not fair to the taxpayers of Ottawa, and they're getting angry about it. You have to show the cost-benefit analysis of using that site for a landfill. You see all the technical. Now, there was a summary here, and I think it's appropriate now. It was after they studied for the land for the satellite city. What we had there was H. King Associates, who actually did the major study, and oversaw Golder Associates. They all did the soil studies, the geotechnical studies, and what they summed it up to be, to sum up, it has now been established that the subsoil at this site presents major problems to development on a scale which has not been experienced before. These problems are concerned not only with the design and execution of foundations and services, but with every aspect of the planning and staging throughout. It is hard to conceive that carefully engineered ground rules established at the outset will be followed at all times, and yet the consequences of any deviations would likely be serious, particularly for those who have to maintain and service the development. Thus, while the engineering problems can be overcome by the expenditures of significant or sufficient money, it would appear that there are major constraints imposed by the soil conditions to the planning of any sort of viable development beyond a sterile dormitory suburb. Now, I've got nothing, I think the planning as far as landfill site selection is great, but you have to apply it, and you're not applying it here. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Actually, Councillor Lieber has a question for you.
Sorry, your presentation was compelling and very interesting. I just didn't quite understand if you could unpack that very last point. The planning is not being applied here.
I can't hear it. I'm sorry, I have hard of hearing.
Oh.
So what did you mean by your very last sentence? The planning is not being applied here.
It would be clear from the report. Are you speaking to the report?
No, your very last sentence.
Well, I can't understand how, if you're talking about the planning process, I don't understand how zoning was changed to allow a landfill on that site. You know, they know this. Your engineers know it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the delegation. So I'll open it up to members of committee and councillors to ask questions of staff. Councillor Gower.
Thank you to all the delegations for sharing your perspectives, and thank you for staff for bringing this report to us. Can staff just reiterate again what opportunity you've had for inspections of the site due diligence? The last delegation said this is like buying a house. So what have we done to ensure or to understand what risks we may be facing should we decide to purchase it?
So, Mr. Mayor, a couple points to that is through the due diligence process, we've had access to all of the information related to the process that was followed, the documentation, the analysis, all of the approvals that are in place with the Ministry of the Environment. And we've also assembled a team of experts to be able to review all of that information to ensure that basically they were providing us guidance around any outstanding risks and concerns related to the site. So I'm very confident that we have the right team that have access to information to be able to make recommendations moving forward.
What kind of experts have we been working with? Can you give us some context?
So we've had geotechnical experts. We've had experts that have been involved with our site at Trail. We've also had financial experts and legal experts review every elements of this deal.
And do you have any comments on concerns that the various delegations have raised about the viability of this site for a landfill?
Mr. Mayor, I would say that the concerns that have been raised are certainly very valid, but I would also confirm that basically a lot of those were part of the evaluation process, and they have been very well considered through the process. There's a reason why these processes take so long to be completed, is there is a lot of evaluation and analysis, investigation that takes place to be able to satisfy the requirements of the ministry to be able to issue the approvals at the end.
Okay, I may come on after, but I'll let my colleagues take over from here. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you. A couple of the delegations now have made the assertion, which I think is an interesting one. If this technically could be run as a landfill, it would have been by the private entity that currently owns it. Are you aware of any technical reason why Taggart is not running this as a landfill today?
Mr. Mayor, we don't have any insights in terms of why Taggart Miller not operating the site. All we can confirm is basically the information that we've been reviewing, and we don't see a technical reason for that. But we cannot comment on behalf of Taggart Miller.
So do you believe that the city has good insight as to the technical requirements of the site, understanding how we would want to use the site, and that it is technically possible at with financial implications that the city can afford?
Mr. Mayor, I'm satisfied that we have done the proper due diligence on this site.
The sorry, I forget the gentleman's name, has made the assertion, I'm sure he's correct, that the existing site permissions expire. Certainly, we're not going to be in a position to build and operate a landfill site there anytime in the next few years. What is that risk that the existing permissions will have expired and that we'll be challenged to get those back on the table?
So, Mr. Mayor, when we reached out to the Ministry of Environment to make sure that basically we had our facts, our understanding is that the requirements that were imposed have been met. So we're not anticipating that to be an issue. And if there was anything that needs to be extended, that is part of our common process that we deal with the ministry. So that is certainly not a concern from a city perspective.
Do we have advanced understanding that the ministry would be amenable to those extensions?
As I understand, yes, because any of the major requirements have already been fulfilled.
Do you have a view with respect to the assertions that were made by one of the first delegations that it would be less expensive for the city in the long term to contract out our waste?
So, Mr. Mayor, that is part of the evaluation that we're going to be bringing forward in Q1 of 2027. What I can share is basically, if we go back to the information that we had provided to council earlier this year on the review of different technologies, the use of private sites was considered. It is an option. The risks associated with that is that you lose total control over how much the city we have to pay over the long run. And I think it's not an insignificant risk because, as I mentioned before, landfill capacity is at a premium in this province. It will continue to be at a premium for the foreseeable future. So when you look at supply and demand, that tends to drive prices up. So that is certainly a risk, but that's a risk that we will be providing more details to be able to inform council when we come back in the first quarter of 2027.
I note that GFL, which is one of the alternatives that one of the delegations mentioned, is a publicly traded company, and publicly traded companies operating multinationally are not necessarily the. I'm not sure that we can rely on a publicly traded multinational company to have the interests of Ottawa taxpayers in mind for the long term. So I'm sympathetic to the risk there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Dudas.
Thank you. I know it's been said before, but could you just remind me, the trail waste facility is nearing the end of its life. Can you confirm again what is the capacity and when we're going to reach the end of life on that facility?
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, right now, if we maintain the status quo, there's about 10 years left of capacity. Through the initiatives that were approved through the solid waste master plan, the ones that are most significant is basically the expansion that we're looking at trail right now that we're working through with the ministry and the public. If we get the approvals, that would add an additional probably 15 years to the capacity. And then the other measures around leveraging private sites in the area, the island limits that we've imposed is probably an additional 6 years. So combined, we're probably looking at around 20 to 21 years additional.
Okay. So if the city does not own an alternative site at the end of that time period, what would we have to do to dispose of our waste? And can staff provide a ballpark figure of what the costs would look like and compare on the current per ton costs? Like I'm just trying to understand, what do we do if we hit the end of life with Trail Road? Where do we put our waste, and what is the estimated cost for us in terms of addressing that requirement?
So, Mr. Mayor, if we run out of capacity at Trail and we don't have any other mechanism to deal with our waste, our only option at that point is to send our waste to private facilities. Very difficult to provide a cost at this point, because at that point it would become basically whatever the tipping fee that we would have to pay that private site at that time. And that is very much market driven. That would be outside of the city's control. We would be basically subject to whatever market conditions are in place at that time. So we essentially lose a lot of control in terms of how we're managing waste in the city, because now we become fully dependent on a private sector entity.
And does this, if the city were to acquire this land, does this fit into our solid waste master plan? Has this always been an option available to us?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, as I indicated early in the presentation, basically what we're presenting or discussing today is very much in alignment with our solid waste master plan. The solid waste master plan is a 30-year plan, and we know that within that 30 years, we're going to be running out of capacity for trail, despite all of our efforts in terms of reusing, diverting the organics program. And because it takes, as we mentioned, about 15 years to be able to plan a new facility, basically we need to be looking at how we manage the residuals. And this is very much in alignment with our plan.
Okay. One of the delegations asked about community benefits. If a private owner operator were to purchase this land and operate it as a facility, as a waste facility, there might be community benefits in play. If the city were to acquire this land, what conversation would the local councillor, the city have with the community to accommodate some of those needs, almost similar to community benefits that are paid out by other landfill sites?
So I'll start and I'll ask my colleague Debbie to fill in if there's any elements that I'm not interpreting properly. So I would say two things. The community benefits agreements typically apply to third parties. For example, Carp Road, there's a community benefit agreement with Carp. It's a third party entity. And the reason why we enter into those agreements is because they're here to make profits. So it's to leverage the opportunity to be able to allow the community to share into those profits. When it's a city-owned facility, we're not in the business of making profits. We're in the business of providing services to the community. So we typically don't have the same structure related to community benefits agreement. One of the motion that's in front of committee this morning is to look at kind of those options, because we do not have a mechanism at this point. So that is something that we would need to explore and come back to say what options are available, because it's not just isolated to the site. Then we have Trail Road, we have our sewage treatment plant at Ropac around where there's impact. So I think it would turn into a broader discussion, but it's not something that fits within existing processes that we have right now.
And that is a discussion, that is a motion that staff support?
We support looking at options to be able to report back to council in 2027.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dudas. Councillor Lulaf.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to speak clearly about why I cannot support purchasing land for another landfill. This is not the decision that our city should take, and it's not the legacy that we should be leaving. Let's start with the core issue. Burying garbage is not a modern or progressive solution. Cities across the world are moving toward waste energy. If we create more landfill space, we give ourselves permission, despite what's being said today, we give ourselves permission to delay that transition. Every new acre for buried waste pulls us backward instead of forward. Landfills are also an incredibly inefficient use of land. They consume enormous areas that cannot be restored or put back into productive use for generations. In a growing city, that's simply irresponsible. The city of Ottawa already owns significant land. We're not short on space. And what we are in short of right now is a long-term strategy. And if council were determined to explore a new landfill, breaking new ground makes no sense. A spent quarry would be far more appropriate than purchasing fresh land and permanently writing it off. Then there's the cost. We're not supposed to be talking about specifics today, obviously, and we're not aware of the specifics until we have our in-camera session, but it's been reported that this will cost an extraordinary amount of money. We'd be committing, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars into a facility that we should not be building in the first place. That money should be going towards modernizing our waste system, not doubling down on an outdated approach. There are also clear practical issues. Do we have the infrastructure in the rural East End to support more truck traffic? We do not. These roads are already strained. Adding heavy truck movement will create safety concerns and real impacts for residents at our cost. I also want to address the fear that has been that's made its way into this debate. Landfills are heavily regulated. The fear-mongering about who might operate one and what they might put into it debases the entire discussion. It's a dump, for crying out loud. We're not putting flowers and spent potpourri in it. The rules are strict, oversight is real, and the private landfill on Carp Road already exceeds provincial standards. The idea that somehow this becomes a dumping ground for Toronto or Kingston is not based in reality. Toronto already uses waste to energy, the catchment area is much smaller, and the cost to truck garbage from other municipalities is that far is prohibitive. We also need to acknowledge that council was previously told Trail Road was at a critical capacity right now. Residents were asked to cram their waste into a bin size that, by the way, doesn't even exist. And now we're told that there's 10 more years of capacity on top of what was already there. And if we truly have more than a decade, then the responsible choice is obvious. We should be moving to waste energy and finally stopping the practice of burying our trash. We should leave future generations an asset, not another liability. Finally, and more importantly, we're preempting the solid waste master plan. The council directed staff to examine 4 options properly. Buying land now undermines that process and undermines the will of council. If we want good planning, we need to let the planning finish. There are other options on the table, and we risk pigeonholing ourselves today. And I want to be clear about something I find troubling. This is being framed as a local issue. It is not. It has massive implications for the solid waste master plan. It is a citywide issue. Treating it like it's just a local concern is disingenuous and does not reflect the scale of what we are deciding. And so for all of these reasons, I can't support the purchase of land for a new landfill, permitted or not. Ottawa needs a modern waste strategy built on innovation, responsibility, and honesty with residents, not another hole in the ground. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Just some questions to staff. Whether traditional waste storage in a landfill or a waste energy, the city would require further landfilling space than exists now. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, correct. Based on proven technologies right now, even if it was waste to energy, there's still a residual that needs to be addressed through a landfill.
Okay. And the solid waste master plan that's been developed thus far has costed some of those options. The potential purchase of this land would still fit within the process that committee and council had laid out. Is that correct?
So, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to venture into the costing piece. All I can say is that basically whatever we're presenting is very much in line with the information that we've previously provided to council.
Yeah, thank you for that. With regard to the potential to have this operate in the future with trail roads expected life expectancy, is it an option in the future to have trail road? I mean, I suppose you'd almost have to have trail road come towards the end of its life expectancy and then begin operating this site, or will these be running concurrently right away in the next 5-10 years?
Mr. Mayor, I wouldn't want to venture at this stage in terms of how we would actually operationalize the site. I think there's a lot more review that would need to be done on that point so that we could come back to council with recommendations around how would we see developing the site compared to basically where we're at with trail right now.
Okay, and would a development application process with site plan approval studies be required for the CRRC if it were acquired?
So, Mr. Mayor, the site plan is still outstanding, so that is a process that we would need to complete for the site.
Okay, I understand the development application process would also be needed and follow the city's existing process around consultation and discussion with residents, which we heard from residents today, which is extremely important. In terms of a strategic asset or potential strategic asset in acquiring this, has there been an opportunity like this for the city in the last 30 years that's presented itself on solid waste?
In terms of the opportunity that's in front of us, not that I'm aware of.
And are staff sympathetic to the concerns that have been expressed by residents here, feeling like they want more voice, that they have raised concerns around permitting and leachating groundwater infiltration? Is this something that you're actively going to address and make sure that we're consulting with these residents?
Mr. Mayor, yes. And I want to use the trail road as an example. We're looking at the site. The city is already in the waste management business. We already operate a very sophisticated landfill. We understand basically the compliance requirements, the legislative requirements of working with the ministry, but also working with the surrounding community. With landfills, it comes challenges, odors and all that. And we work very closely with the surrounding community, but we also take very seriously our responsibility as a neighbor to make sure that we basically minimize the impacts to the extent possible. And part of that is to work with the community so that they are understanding what we're doing, why we're doing, and if there are any limited impacts so that they can understand what's taking place. So we are very transparent in terms of our process. We have annual reporting that we need to provide to the ministry. In the case of Trail, we do have a public liaison committee that we share the information also with. So I would anticipate and expect that basically we would be following very similar processes that have worked well around Trail.
Okay, thank you for that. I've looked at the motions put forward by other members on behalf of Councillor Skalski, and I support them. Does staff have any issues with the motions as presented at this point, or are they supportive?
Mr. Mayor, we are supportive of the motions.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll just say that our very best method of preventing landfill expansion and preventing huge expenditures for waste energy, that is the very costliest thing we could do, is to reduce our waste. It is about reducing our waste at source. It is about coming up with other solutions that residents, I think, have adapted to quite well and could adapt to in the future. But the more we push back on that upfront reduction, the more these types of decisions need to be made. So for my councillor colleagues around the table, our best option here is to diversify how we actually reduce waste at source and reduce waste within households, because that will prevent these costly expenditures in the future and these types of debates where nobody wants expansion of landfill or waste energy, the smells that come with that, or the costs that come with that in their communities in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't prepared yet to speak. I was writing up my questions, but thank you, staff, for the presentation today. I, listened intently to Councillor Luloff speak, and his sentiment was very much aligned to how I was thinking before I came today, because we have a process in place as part of our solid waste master plan. And we heard from the general manager that in Q1 of 2027, we'll receive a report back that talks to new landfill and or, the incineration option. And to Councillor Luloff's point is, does this proposal today, does the acquisition of this site for a landfill, leapfrog ahead of, does it require us to play our hand sooner than getting all information before us? So to that point, I want to ask the general manager to comment in general terms and explain to the committee why, even though we have that major study ongoing that talks about potentially larger landfill in Ottawa's future and or incineration facility, why acquiring this land today is best for the city of Ottawa.
So, Mr. Mayor, we've mentioned a few times in the presentation, and even Councillor Brown's direction to staff, the work that we're doing right now in terms of coming back to council in Q1 of 2027, that work will proceed. The consideration of acquiring the site does not halt or alter that process. Even if waste to energy was to be considered, we will still require a landfill to manage the residuals. So it's not just a waste to energy facility alone. There still needs to be a landfill component. This would provide that flexibility or address that requirement. The other options really are to look at the use of private landfills, which means that we are fully dependent on the private sector, or building a new landfill, which this is also in alignment with that option. So I don't see the consideration of the site to be misaligned with the directions that council has already provided.
Thank you for that. That's important. I appreciate that. Just to confirm, again, if the city of Ottawa acquires this site, it will only be used for residential household waste. Is that correct? Or do we have plans to allow other streams into the landfill?
Mr. Mayor, our focus would be to operate as a municipal landfill for municipal waste, similar to what we do at Trail. So unless we were directed by council at some point to say there's a business case to accept private waste, we would be focusing on addressing the needs of our community.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is just about our due diligence with respect to the purchasing price, which I realize I'm well aware of what can and cannot be discussed in open forum. But can you assure the public what steps did we take to ensure that a fair price is being negotiated in this regard, that we've done our research on what the land value is, what it's zoned for, and what the actual value is on behalf of taxpayers?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I definitely do not want to venture into the methodology that was followed because that's getting into the costing piece. What I could say is basically we did assemble a team of experts to be able to support us in the valuation process. So we've been working very closely with them on that piece. So I'm comfortable basically that we're bringing the skill sets and the people that are needed to help inform the city on this.
If council agrees to acquire this site and additional details are then made public, can you commit to explaining in more detail at that point to the public about what steps the city took to ensure that we are defending the taxpayer in this regard, and that, in your opinion, whatever price is settled upon is best for taxpayers?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we can definitely commit that, as I mentioned in the presentation, once the process is complete and we're permitted to share the information, our intent, whether the city is successful or not, is to report back on the process that we followed and also the financial elements of that.
Thank you. And thank you for answering Councillor Menard's question about the motions and direction before us. I support them as well. I just wanted to better understand one of the motions from Councillor Skulski with respect to community benefit agreement, positive outcomes from a potential agreement. What might that look like? What type of benefits do you think are possible to achieve on behalf of and deliver to the local communities?
So, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to speak for Councillor Skalski. I think one of the reasons why the recommendation is framed as reporting back on options is this is not something that we currently have in place. So it's not like we can point to an example to say, well, in this case, this is what we've done. Any community benefits agreement that are in place are more with a private sector entity. So it's something that we would need to consider in more detail before we can report back in 2017 or 2027.
So just so I'm aware, the outcome of that particular motion would be wrapped in with the Q1 2027 report. It would include potential community benefits at that point. I'm just trying to understand the local council will be very engaged, but how will this committee be informed going forward about what's being considered and how that will be financed?
So one of the conditions to proceed with that is it assumes that it depends on basically whether or not the city acquires the site.
Sure.
So if it does, we are on similar timelines in terms of reporting back, whether it's at the same committee. It's too early to be able to tell, but we would certainly be looking at aligning some of those discussions, especially if we were to be successful in terms of acquiring the site.
Okay, I look forward to be better informed as this evolves should council agree to acquire this site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Vice Chair Kitts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know costs for operations are not yet determined, but do you have an estimate?
Not at this stage. The only thing that I could give is basically the cost that we operate trail right now. That's the only benchmark that I would be able to provide you with.
Yeah, so in the 2026 budget, it has landfill operations at 36.3 million. So kind of safe to, it's reasonable to assume that that cost would be ported over to the new landfill once trail is sunset.
So maybe I'll ask Sheldon McDonald that's on the line to confirm the annual operating cost for trail.
Good morning. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for the question. So I'll just kind of back up a little bit. So in the Waste Technologies report, we did provide high-level estimates for what the cost would be for landfilling at a new facility. So I'll go back and take a look at those numbers and give them to you, Councillor. As part of the budget, I'll have to go back and double check in order to ensure that we're only providing the landfill operations part, because there's some other measures that are bundled underneath the landfill that may not be specifically to the actual operation of a new landfill site. So through you, Mr. Chair, I would appreciate an opportunity to get back to the council on her questions.
Okay, thank you. The dump in Navan just last week announced that they are starting the process to expand, and they cited constraints with space for commercial waste in the city. But I gather, given your response to Councillor Brockington, this acquisition would not, or this site would not accept that kind of waste, and so there would be no change, or there would be no influence to the Navan dumps plans.
Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned, right now our intent would be to be able to address the needs of the city from a municipal waste perspective. So unless there was a business case that warranted accepting construction and institutional waste, but that is not the intent at this time. Plus, I'm not sure that our timelines would even align with what the Navan expansion is looking at.
Okay, that was what I thought, but thank you for confirming. You had said to Councillor Leeper you have no idea why Miller is not moving forward, correct? There was no, I guess, reason given why they decided to move away from proceeding.
Mr. Mayor, we have not had any discussions. I could give you kind of what I think it might be, but it would not be factual.
Okay.
Because we have not had any discussions with them.
But the city does contract Miller for some residential curbside collection, correct?
Correct. Miller is provides our contracted services for waste collection. Okay.
So reasonable to assume, or it's in the realm of possibility that we would contract them moving forward with this site.
Maybe so, Mr. Mayor, I think there's two different pieces. They are part of our collections contract, but they do not manage any of the waste management facilities. So here we're talking about more the waste management component, not the collections.
Right. I think they stand to benefit regardless if we move forward. But I'll move on. Has there been any dialogue with Russell Township, just given the proximity to the boundary?
Mr. Mayor, there have not been any discussions with them, and part of that is we're still in a confidential process. So no, there has not been any discussions.
If council does move forward with the acquisition, would there be, like, what would that look like in terms of dialogue with Russell Township? I know that there's a desire to be kept in the loop on how this moves forward, again, given their proximity to the site. So just looking to see what that would look like.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think one of the motions from Councillor Skalski indicates that as part of the community liaison that Russell Township be included as part of the process.
Okay, great. And then my last question, if this is under city ownership, would there be a possibility for other municipalities to use the landfill, or that's not on the table?
Sorry, under city ownership?
Yeah.
Or we could always make it available to others, but again, that would be more of a decision of council to proceed in that direction or not.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Mr. Mayor, I have the response to the councilor's question on the operating costs. It's $12 million a year is the cost to operate trail.
Okay, so this 36.3 million line item includes other activities at trail?
Correct.
Not operating. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kitts. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Luloff didn't leave much meat on the bone. He spoke very well and raised issues that we hear often from rural residents. The one thing I would say is that regardless of what the recommendation rising from committee is today, if it happens to be that we should move forward with trying to purchase this site, what we're doing is buying time. That's all we're doing, is buying time, because as Councillor Luloff mentioned, we're dumping garbage in a hole and filling it up. Regardless of how engineered that solution is, all we're doing is buying time. And to Councillor Menard's point, we don't want to be in this position as a council, although we are here today. We don't want to have another council come back and say, well, what do we do now? But if all we do is landfill, every successive council will be in this position, whether it's 10 years from now or 50 years from now. And so this is not an out. And we heard the mayor speak to that point. We've heard staff say continuing with landfilling isn't an out, because even a landfill or an incinerator would require landfilling space. So for me, as the dumpster for Ottawa, my ward is the dumpster for Ottawa. I don't want to see another rural ward, another rural community have to put up with a site that is not as technologically advanced as it could be. And so I am concerned. I share the concerns of Councillor Skalski, who is in an impossible position, coming to this council late in the term, having to literally hit the road running on several contentious files, all which impact her ward. And I certainly feel for her residents. So I want to ask staff just to confirm, if ultimately council chooses to move forward with the recommendation to purchase this site, and that's the direction council provides to staff, it does not take a modern, proven waste to energy solution off of the table.
Mr. Mayor, it does not take any other options off the table.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for the time.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Skalski.
Thank you, Mayor. As the councillor that represents the residents of Carlsbad Springs, I want to start by saying that residents were beside themselves when they learned last week that the city is contemplating the purchase of this site. In the last 8 days, I've attended several community meetings, fielded endless emails and phone calls. One message rings loud and clear. Rural communities are tired of being treated like second-class citizens. They're tired of being the backyard dumping ground storage shed for the city of Ottawa. This rural community fought tooth and nail for over a decade to stop this site at Boundary Road from being approved because of serious environmental concerns backed by expert analysis that the site is not suitable for a landfill. After years of fighting, they were assured that the site would be a recycling facility and used for commercial construction waste and soil processing. Imagine their outrage to learn now that in 2024, Taggart Miller had residential waste added to the allowable uses on the site. The feature which makes this most appealing to a municipal audience happened completely under the radar. On top of that, they learned that it has been for sale for months, but that the seller imposed a silent process to solicit bids. And while this may be common practice in land acquisitions, to real people, this isn't any old land acquisition. This is the purchase of their backyard with their tax dollars to do exactly what they fought against for the last decade. The conditions on this sale are so tight that we could only squeeze 2 weeks of transparency to have a conversation with residents about this. 2 weeks. Imagine we spent 5 years talking about a sports arena, and we get 2 weeks to engage on this issue. This is an acquisition of this scale requires in-depth analysis. It's no wonder why they feel like second-class citizens. This is exactly how they're being treated. This same community has felt blow after blow to their rural way of life. They've lost faith that it's possible for politicians or the rest of Ottawa to care about what's in their best interest. Yet somehow this deal is framed exactly that way. Imagine the fury to learn that if the city doesn't buy it, someone else will, and it will still be a dump. For them, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't, at the whim of a process led by the devil you do not trust. That isn't a choice. Imagine then learning that, in fact, the city can't answer how the site will be used. How do you even have an opinion on that? Just a few months ago, council directed staff to come back with these 3 options for the future of our solid waste plan. continue status quo and supplement with private facilities, create a new landfill, or advance waste to energy incineration. Don't let anyone convince you that a decision won't be made until 2027. I don't buy that a strategic purchase of a landfill now won't tip the scales towards landfilling. Ottawans deserve a real discussion about the options for incineration or for using the many private facilities that already exist. Sure, maybe the decision today won't force our hand, but this is like saying, let's decide 2 years from now about whether or not we buy a cottage, and then purchasing waterfront property as a strategic acquisition. Don't tell me that a cottage doesn't come next. There is no universe where we can decouple an investment like this from the consideration of our future plans. This will be a landfill. These are tax dollars. Let's decide what we want, then buy what we need. So they heard that it is in their best interest for the city to own it. The city promises to be a better steward of the site and be more transparent. What makes us better? Anyone who buys this site will need to adhere to provincial regulations for managing the landfill. Anyone who buys it would have to collaborate with a community liaison committee, as has been in place for years. Public sector landfill companies can set up a community benefit agreement. Is that in the cards here? I think it better be. Otherwise, we're saying that rural communities are just expected to accept the negative burden of Ottawa's waste needs without any positive benefits or compensation, and that is not right. So I'm not a member of this committee. Unfortunately, I don't get to vote here, but I do stand with my residents and I will not support this. I just want to begin by thanking Councillor Kitts and Councillor Brown for offering to table the motions on my behalf today. I think that the 4 motions that were put on the table were meant to reflect everything that I've heard from residents in the past 8 days in the most succinct way possible. And I'll continue to carry their interest forward in this discussion in camera. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillors. Order. Sorry, there's to be no applause during our meetings. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Skalski. Councillor Brown. Sorry, Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely appreciate the passion from my colleague, Councillor Skalski. I regret that I have to follow that. First question to staff. In the staff report, it says that the site has approval to receive up to 450,000 tons of waste annually. So if this site were ultimately to be used as the location for a waste to energy facility, and if such a facility like an incinerator still requires some form of landfill for a much smaller amount of residual waste, does staff have any sense of what might be the annual tonnage required of residual waste, say, from an incinerator?
So, Mr. Mayor, I hope I heard the question properly. Right now, we would be bound based on the volumes that are permitted on the site. So even if there was a different use, we'd still have to go through an environmental assessment process to be able to change that use, but we would still be bound by those capacity limits, regardless of how we're planning on using the site.
And sorry, I was asking that question for a different reason. If I understand correctly, this site has authority for up to 450,000 tons of waste annually. But we are suggesting that this site could be used for an incinerator if that's the direction we went in. My question is, my understanding is that an incinerator produces a far smaller amount of residual waste. And so we likely wouldn't need to use 450,000 tons annually. And so my question is, does staff able to project now what might be the amount of annual tonnage of residual waste from the scale of incinerator that Ottawa might be contemplating?
Mr. Mayor, it's really premature at this point to try to provide that level of detail. The piece that I would qualify, though, is it's not because an approval gives us up to a certain capacity that we will actually be using that capacity. We would only be using that daily capacity that's required, and that's same thing in terms of how we operate trail. We have a daily capacity or daily maximum that we need to meet, but it doesn't mean that every day that we're actually meeting that daily capacity.
Thank you. Also in the report, so it says it is off the site is currently authorized to accept residential, industrial, commercial, and institutional waste and construction and demolition waste. So one of my colleagues spoke about this already, but is it currently within the scope of the city's responsibility to manage industrial, commercial, and institutional waste?
Mr. Mayor, no, that falls to the province to manage that sector.
So with that in mind, if we acquire a site that is authorized as such, would this mean that we would be considering an expansion of our mandate?
Mr. Mayor, no, because the site is already permitted to accept municipal waste.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that we, the city, if it's authorized for industrial, commercial, we, the city, would not be then therefore considering that we take on that responsibility.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
So
it's
with
not
that
because it's permitted for that use that we would need to accept that waste.
Of course. But if it's permitted for that use, would that mean that we might be considering leasing out a portion of the land to, let's say, a private contractor for disposal of those categories of waste? Should we acquire it?
Mr. Mayor, those are not discussions that are even being contemplated at this point. That would be more if the city was successful to look at options, but we would need to come back to council to be able to provide any insights on those operational uses.
Okay. So please do let me know if this next question that addresses the purchase price, I'm not talking numbers at all, but please let me know if this is out of scope. But if we have no intention of using the site for industrial, commercial, and industrial waste, have we negotiated a price based on permitted uses of the site that we have no intention of using it for?
Well, I'm going to jump in here to say that there's no price that has been negotiated. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'll hold on to that question for, I should have rephrased that question, but I'll wait till council anyways. Thank you though. So different topic. If it's true that we might be acquiring the site now, but possibly not needing to use it for at least another decade, I'm curious about a topic that was raised by one of the delegates about the possibility of monetizing the site in the interim. The delegate from Cafes spoke about possibly using the site for ground-based solar power generation for however long it would be in our possession before conversion. Has staff considered the potential viability of any kind of revenue generating opportunity prior to development as a landfill?
Mr. Mayor, not at this point, no.
We had another delegate speak about his concerns over the site's geologic conditions, that the use of the land posed an increased risk to earthquakes caused by liquefaction of Leda clay, that any underlying infrastructure we'd have beneath the landfill to remove contaminants could be at risk of such damages, that the potential damage to that infrastructure could increase any area contamination. The delegate suggested that these might be some of the reasons why the site hasn't been developed yet by its current owners. Can you specify what work the city did to examine these geotechnical and or environmental concerns?
Mr. Mayor, as I indicated previously, we've assembled a team of experts to be able to help to support the city in terms of its due diligence process. So reviewing basically all the information that's available and also providing that technical lens on a site that has received ministry approval.
Thank you. I'm following up on a line of questions from Councillor Leeper. Another delegate spoke about the site's permits, specifically about site permits expiring in 2027. When I asked the delegate to explain his concern, he said that it's his understanding that if significant construction of the site isn't underway by 2027, then the provincial permit whereby the province grants the right to use it as a landfill expires, unless we were to extend those permits. Is it true that until we'd be in a position where those permits are extended, that this expiry would mean that it could not be used as a landfill?
Mr. Mayor, as I indicated, when we checked with the Ministry of Environment, their confirmation that we've received is that basically any limitations have been lifted. So that would not be an issue if the city was to acquire it.
Would there be a cost involved in extending the permit beyond 2027?
Not that we're aware of, because basically there are no outstanding conditions, according to our discussion with the ministry.
Thank you. Councillor Brown was talking about buying time, and I've got a question that's similar in scope there. So, knowing that there may be geotechnical environment.
That's time,
Okay.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair.
Is this your last question, or?
Well, other people have questions. I'll just get back on. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to offer a perspective, because in Stittsville we have a landfill, a private landfill that operates in very close proximity, the Waste Management West Carleton Environmental Center on Carp Road. And I don't want to disparage Waste Management. I have no reason to believe they're anything but a responsible and good operator. But we don't have a lot of insight because it's a private facility. I compare our relationship with the city staff who operate Trail Road Landfill, where we have clarity about the operations, about future plans. We have access to reporting. We can go directly to our own staff to get that, rather than having to go through a provincial ministry. There's more access to information available through ATIP processes that are just not available for private sector actors. Any plans around expansion or changes to the operation, we have visibility into that. So the question of private versus public, there's no doubt in my mind that a publicly operated landfill gives us so much more control, so much more accountability around the operations. We still have some due diligence we need to do as council around price. We still need to be certain that we need that landfill capacity, and that the price we may pay for it is fair and justified. But I think the opportunity to make a landfill, convert a landfill from private to public, is a really, really compelling opportunity, and we need to take that seriously. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Skalski.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Many of my questions were already asked already, but I did have a few more that I just wanted to get from you on the record for residents who had asked for these questions to be asked. The site used to be an auto wrecker before it was purchased by Taggart Miller. What assurances do we have that the site we'd be buying is environmentally sound and not already contaminated? And I'm sorry if you already answered part of that, but we just want to hear specifically, what comforts do we have that it is not already in a contaminated site?
So, Mr. Mayor, through the environmental assessment process, there is extensive site investigation that's done, looking at basically the soil conditions, looking at the groundwater conditions. So basically all of that information is available to help to inform basically the state of the current site, and that essentially establishes the baseline for the site.
So when you say the environmental assessment was conducted, does that mean, can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that? What exactly is done? Where exactly on the site is testing occurring?
So throughout the site, there would be boreholes, for example, that would be put into the ground. That helps to understand the soil characteristics. It also allows to be able to test the groundwater quality, and that would be done at different points across the site, just to be able to understand basically the site characteristics. And that would be requirements that are imposed by the ministry to be able to satisfy their requirements of the process.
Okay, so is it fair to say that we're not concerned that the site could be contaminated?
Any information that would be a concern, we would be aware of it through the work that was already completed, and the ministry would also be aware of any concerns.
Okay, is it actually an option to undertake our own assessments at this stage before we move forward with a bid, or is that actually impossible?
So there wouldn't be enough time to be able to undertake anything that's more meaningful. There's already extensive work that would be done. The only time that we would undertake more work is once we get to the design stage. Once we have a better understanding in terms of what we're trying to put on the site, and then we would be a lot more targeted in terms of the investigations.
Thank you.
And my colleague can add a bit to that.
So just to add, so at the time of the original provincial environmental assessment process, the city's natural systems team was engaged in that process, and in particular, they were looking at it from the perspective of any anticipated impacts to watercourses, to wildlife habitat, and to long-term forest cover. And so they were involved also in looking at what are the mitigations that would need to be put in place. And of course, as a city were to acquire this site, all of those would continue to be important for the city to continue to uphold and to mitigate against as well.
Thank you for that. Did the city perform, so I'm sorry if this has been answered, I was trying to track as we were going here, but did the city perform a risk assessment prior to issuing the recommendation in the report? Like a full risk assessment that would identify the hazards, the likelihood that a hazard could occur, the severity, and determine whether or not that risk is acceptable to the city?
Mr. Mayor, the work that we would have done is through the due diligence process, where we're looking at basically where are the potential risks, what's the information that's available also to be able to help to support those risks. So that would be part of our process. And I just want to also clarify one point, that all of the information that's available on the site, a lot of that is already publicly available because the environmental assessment was published.
Are you able to elaborate a little bit about what risks were identified here? I'm not sure if that has to remain in camera.
I think every element that was available in terms of information for the site has been looked at. So I can't single out one more than the other. And again, understanding that the ministry has also done a lot of due diligence on this in terms of the approvals that they impose and the approvals that they've issued.
Okay, just the last question. Do we have money to pay for this, or is this being funded by debt?
Mr. Mayor, we do have the funding for this. This aligns to our solid waste long-range financial plan, which also aligns to our solid waste master plan. So it is within the affordable plan.
So it's not debt?
Mr. Mayor, it would be mainly debt, yes, but that debt is part of the affordability plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the financial points with a couple of quick questions. So just to be clear, we have a plan to spend money on solutions for solid waste over the coming decades. And so this would fit within that plan. And if we were not to spend the money on this acquisition, we would spend that money on something else instead that would be a solid waste solution for the future. Is that right?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct. And I'll reiterate, it is within the affordability of our solid waste master plan, which is also in the affordability of our overall city finances.
Okay, and just on our city finances, we heard a couple of people saying earlier we can't afford to take on more debt and we're already stretched to the limit, et cetera, et cetera. Could you just reiterate kind of where we stand? Our credit rating is excellent. Our debt ratio is well below the provincial limit. Could you just reiterate some of that, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So as I've stated before, our Moody's rating is AAA. Our S&P rating is AA+. The provincial limit from a debt load is 25% of own source revenues. City Council has endorsed 7.5% as per the fiscal framework. Our actuals run below 5%, in some cases even below 4%, so there's capacity there. When we look at our long-range financial plans, as I talked about before, we have a rate long-range financial plan, housing, solid waste, the tax will be coming forward in the new year. These are all long-range financial plans, which this is in the plan and it's within our affordability. We have a healthy reserve balance. We have a healthy liquidity balance when it comes to our capital. Our overall capital work in progress tends to be around $3 billion, which is what that means in layman's terms is we have access to some really good liquidity if needed. So overall, we're in a good position, and this is well within the affordability of the overall plan.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So let's vote first on the motions. So we'll start with the motion on Community Liaison Committee and Environmental Impact Transparency. Is that carried? The motion on human health risk assessment, is that carried? The motion on the rural truck route review, signage and infrastructure, is that carried? The motion on positive community benefit agreement, is that carried? And then Councillor Leeper has asked that the direction by Councillor Brown be turned into a motion. So on the motion, on the, what was a direction, now a motion on the market sounding exercise for future waste management options, is that carried?
Carried.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll vote on the recommendation. And just a reminder that this is, we're not voting to go one way or another on this. We're voting to refer this to council next week for consideration at council next week. So this is not a decision on whether to proceed or not, but to ask council to consider it. So the report recommendation is that the Finance and Corporate Services Committee recommend that Ottawa City Council consider the acquisition of the Capital Region Resource Recovery Centre as described in the report. Is that carried?
Carried.
Dissent.
Dissent.
Okay, we'll do yeas and nays, please.
Councillor Lulaf.
No.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Curry.
Yes.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney. Councillor King.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Menard.
Yes.
Councillor Brown.
No.
Vice Chair Kitts.
No.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Yes.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Is that carried? Thank you, everyone.